So let me just do quick introduction of the whole event, why we are, or on the District 95 side, why we decided to do this. When I started my work as club growth director in the beginning of this season, I asked my predecessors, well, what about the weak clubs? We need club coaches for that, right? And they said yes. I said, okay, so can you recommend me? We should maybe do a webinar on club coaches. And they said yes. And so then I asked, okay, and can you recommend me a successful club coach from our district? Do you know any such person? And they said no. Well, luckily for us, in Vancouver, I met Florian, and with Florian, we were discussing different topics related to club growth. And then Florian put me in touch with an expert club coach and area director. And because he knows her way, way better than me, I would give the pleasure of introducing her to him, the club growth director of District 91, Mr. Florian Bay.
Thank you very much, Lucas. Good evening, Europe. Guten Abend, Europa. Dobry wieczór. God gwal. Joestet. Buonasera. Jevalta. Dobry wieczór. Dobry wieczór. Dobry wieczorom. Bonsoir, Europe. It's a real pleasure to do this webinar across the entire Europe to discuss club coaching and really club growth. It's a topic that is not necessarily very well explored within Toastmaster, and where we need a bit more structure in my district, in Lucas' district, to be fair, all over the world. We're kind of starting to put together a structured program in District 91. We've got a coordinator, but we also have club coaches that are currently working, and one of them is the lovely Kat Kipling. So Kat and I met about 3 years ago when she was the president of Excalibur Speaker, London's only advanced club. And since then, she kept blossoming as a speaker, becoming a great speech evaluator, until eventually she got thrown into the leadership side of things and couldn't compete in evaluation contest anymore. But I'm sure she's got some plan to go back in the game in a couple of years. And Kat is golden, basically. She's done all her club visits. The vast majority of her club have got 7 out of 7 officers trained. She's been great in supporting new club in marketing agency Mindshare Toastmaster. But with Speak Out, which is a corporate club of Visa, that's where she's done some really amazing work. So the corporate club Visa Speak Out started the year with just 6 members. 6 members, that's nothing. But now they have 16 members. So they're already above club coaching strengths. And the indication are that they will have 20 plus people at the end of the year. The club will get a Phoenix Award for Club Renaissance from the district. And Kat's got a lot of ideas. It's been a lot of work on her. She's been to different sites in London and Reading, and she's got a lot to say. And I'm just going to shut up very shortly and say, Kat, it's now over to you.
Thank you very much, Florian. Well, goodness, that's an introduction, isn't it? If we just switch the slides over to me, then we can get going. There we go. Hopefully you'll see that there. Yes, fantastic. Well,
Kat, before you start, sorry, last question I would like to mention to everyone that's on the webinar. This session is being recorded. The advantages are you will find the recording online. The disadvantages is if you decide to write any bad things on the chat and don't say bad things on the video, the whole world will see. So please be conscious of the fact this webinar is being recorded, and enjoy. Over to you, Kat.
Thank you, Lucas. That's very important. Sergeant Tarmsing there, thank you. And we should also say as well, Lucas is going to be monitoring the chat box. So if you have any questions throughout, just ask, and we'll have a couple of pauses during the presentation to answer them. But if it's right for him to jump in and ask the question straight away, he will do that. So please do get involved. It's about you tonight, so please ask your questions. Well, yes, thanks again to Florian for that superb introduction. I've been a Toastmaster for about 8 years now, and until maybe about 6 months ago, I hadn't really heard of club coaching. I'd heard of people being club sponsors and club mentors, but not really this aspect where you're looking at growing and rebuilding a club. And when I looked, as Florian mentioned, to stand as area director for the area that I ultimately did get voted in for, I went around to visit all of the clubs. I wanted to know what I was letting myself in for. And I had 5 clubs in there, 4 doing great to brilliant, and then this one struggling club. It had found itself in quite a sticky situation. I think Florian was mentioning in the chat beforehand that corporate clubs do sometimes find themselves in a more difficult situation than a community club does, for example, just because everyone's in the same boat to an extent. And this club had that. It had various corporate restructurings, including losing its president of the Toastmasters club to that. And it was really in a bit of a dire straits situation, down to 6 members. It was, though, I have to say, supported by the few members that were left were mighty, and they're still mighty, and they really wanted to take this little nugget of a club that they had and move it forward. Taking on the area director role meant that obviously they'd be coming into my fold and I'd be looking after them from that point of view. But I really saw the opportunity here to get involved on a more personal one-to-one level, specifically with this club in the club coach role, and to work with them to take them forward. I have hot off the press update. They are not now at 16 members, they're at 17 members. So we're nearly 3 times the number of members that they had as at 1st of July this year to today. And I can certainly see them smashing through the 20 members in no time at all, which is a fantastic growth during that period. But I've only been coaching them, and it is them that has delivered that. What I hope you're going to get out of today's session is, if you're potentially looking to be a club coach, you're going to come out of it as excited as I am about the opportunity and signing up straight away, because it sounds like both in District 95 and in District 91, there are plenty of clubs that need some help. If you are sat there as an officer or a member of a club that is struggling, then hopefully this will give you the incentive to reach out to your club growth director, your area director, or anyone else in the organisation to say, please come and help us, we want your support. So moving on very quickly to what we're going to be covering this evening, which is just going to be broken down to 3 really straightforward sections. Firstly, we're going to be looking at what it means to be a club coach, because then we know what we're all talking about. Then what's in it for you as a potential club coach. And then finally, I'll be going through some hints and tips for how, as a club coach, you work to rebuild a struggling club. So looking at the first of those, what does it mean to be a club coach? Well, firstly, the purpose of a club coach is to assist a struggling club. It's as simple as that. You are here to help. What's a struggling club? Well, that is a club that has 12 or fewer paid up members. And once you get down to that stage, you are struggling. You can't really fill a meeting because, bearing in mind, not every single member comes to every single meeting. You've got a really reduced bench to create a successful meeting. When you get appointed as a club coach, you can't be a member of the club previously. The idea is that you're coming with a completely fresh set of ideas, a fresh viewpoint, and a new perspective for that club. After being appointed, though, you can become a member, so that is something that can change in due course. And just a little bit of process there. You're either appointed by the district director or, more likely, the club growth director, as I was. Florian helped me sign off my form and send it off to Toastmasters International, and then you become formally appointed as the club's coach. Important when you're thinking about taking up a new role, what are the goals that you're supposed to be achieving in that? For the club that's being coached, to get it out of this dire straits situation of 12 or fewer members, what you need to do is obviously build a membership, but you really need to be focusing on getting that club back to being a quality club. As I'm sure you're all aware, the way that Toastmasters assesses the quality of our clubs is through the Distinguished Club Programme. And what, as a club coach, they're looking to get the club to is 5 out of your 10 points. And it can be across any of those goals, the educational goals, the membership growth goals, the other activities that you have to work towards to achieve your DCP points. But it's 5 out of the 10. Also, you either need to grow the club from its 12 or fewer members to over 20 members, which is the ideal size, or as an absolute bare minimum, you need a net growth of 5 members. So So you've got your 5 and your 5 there. That's a thing to focus on. Time frame that you need to be looking at doing that during is by the 30th of June. So whenever you're appointed during the year, it's to the next 30th of June. You then have a following 12 months to the following 30th of June, just in case you haven't had enough time to get the club to where it needs to be. But it's really, if you're appointed on the 1st of July, 1 year, you have a maximum of 2 years to complete this task. The ultimate goal, though, and this is the most important thing for me, it's not just about getting to those +5 members or the 5 DCP points. It's about creating a healthy, self-sustaining club. So you might be asking, why do you bother saving a struggling club? Isn't it a bit hard work? Isn't it a bit challenging? Can I really be bothered? There are other ways of me getting my distinguished Toastmaster. Well, let me bring this to you.
Some way more exciting ways.
Well, way more exciting ways, says Lucas. I mean, yes, there are other ways. Depending whether you think there are more exciting or not, I guess is an opinion. But in terms of my view, this is the more exciting way. But I know that some people, and maybe you, Lucas, are included in that you get more excited about setting up a new club. But for me, saving things is exciting, and I'll tell you why. If you think about the primary goal of a Toastmasters club, it's about meeting the needs of the members. And when you're thinking about a struggling club, has it got a solid membership? Well, no, we're saying it's got 12 or fewer members. And with that 12 or fewer members, can it put on a regular basis a quality and effective meeting? Well, no, it can't. In sales and marketing terms, you'll often hear around the cost of a customer acquisition, and lots of statistics around it, but it's somewhere between 5 and 10 times the cost to acquire a new customer as it is to retain an existing customer. I feel that we can apply that same approach to the membership retention within a club. But also, if you think about it, when we've put in a lot of effort and resource into setting a club up in the first place, isn't it better to try and keep that club going than to let it go? So yes, it's not necessarily a financial cost as you would in a sales and marketing scenario, but you have all of this time that's been invested since charter. If you think about it, there's someone who wants to set the club up in the first place, there's a sponsor, there's mentors, there's a whole chain of the district leadership team who are there helping and supporting. There is each committee along the way, there are all of the members along the way, all of that time and energy invested. If the club gets, and sometimes not even for its own fault, to a situation where it needs help, surely we should be the ones that step up and do that. And particularly as well, the club once had a need to exist within its community, within its company. Looking back to what that initial need was, it probably still exists. So hopefully we can work together to rebuild meeting the needs that were originally there for that club. If you're sat there with your club officer hat on, you could be thinking, why should I bother reaching out? And we are given so many tools as Toastmasters in terms of leadership and how we can work with our teams as a club officer, or even just as a member within the club. We can just do this ourselves, maybe. Well, I'd say to you, why wouldn't you reach out for help? I mean, look, these are some of the things that a club coach can bring to your club if you're in a situation where your membership has dropped, quite possibly through no fault of your own, or even if it is something that has happened within your club environment, club coach can come in and assist you with these things. So my view is that you should be really going, yes, please, I would love to have your help. Because believe me, no one within the organisation wants to see your club fail. Now, if you've got any questions around what a club coach is, this is probably a really good time to shout out before I move on to looking at what types of things could entice you into being a club coach.
Kat, I have a question because we have a couple of area directors on the call who might not necessarily want to be coaches themselves, but they are looking out for the right person to coach their club. Could you give them, because you're area director as well, could you, describe how this, as an area director, I can try to identify the right person to coach one of my struggling clubs?
That's a really good question because it very much depends on the situation. And I think that's one of the things I'll be coming on to in the third section around how you work with the clubs. The first thing to do, and as an area director, obviously you're going in, you've recently done your club visits, so you should have a good sense as to what the current situation at each of your clubs is. If there's one either already in the stage to be coached or is getting down to 15, 14, 13 members, it's possible through the area director reports to see where their weakest points are. The person who can go and help with that isn't necessarily a distinguished Toastmaster, the most experienced people in your area or your division or even your district. It's matching the needs. And for me, that's really important. So if someone has a club has a real situation around just they've lost their venue, they need some help because that has created a massive drop in membership. Someone who's just really experienced it, looking into new venues, event spaces, that type of thing might be the right person. So it's very much matching, if you have the luxury of this, to match the skill set to the need in hand. Does that answer the question, do you think?
Well, that definitely answers the question. I think it's really good to mention because I think that can also be the motivation for the person who I will seek, who I find as a club coach. Look, I know that you're great at, for example, negotiations, and we just need someone who will help this club get their venue at the right price, for example. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that could be it. Or if it could be something like the club is struggling because it has a lack of continuity between the meetings. They aren't really presenting a full Toastmasters program, for example. Someone who's been for a longer time might be a really strong person to go and coach that club, because if they've seen developments in clubs in the past, seen the educational program progress, seen their own journey progress, they can be a fantastic sounding board for that club. So it's not necessarily about saying it has to be the most experienced Toastmasters who come in and do that by any means.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we'll move on to the next section, which is hopefully going to hook some of you in. And I'm certainly one of those people that I think you get out of life what you put into it. And I meet a lot of Toastmasters like that. I think it slightly goes with the territory. So firstly, that's hopefully getting some of you excited, because if you put a lot into something, you're going to get a lot out of it. And that has certainly been my experience in the last 6 months of being on this journey with the club that I've been coaching. If you need more incentive than that, here are some of the skills you can develop. So what's in it for you in terms of the things that you can get out of being a club coach? There's a whole host of things on here, but I'd highlight 2 or 3 in particular. One of the ones that I really benefited from is speaking confidence. It's not something I particularly felt like I needed to develop. I've been a Toastmaster for a little while now, as I said at the start, but when you are immersed in going to all of your own club meetings, and I'm certainly going along to almost all of my coaching club meetings, I'm speaking an awful lot more, and it's all about that stage time. It's also a lot more impromptu, because sometimes you have to fill a role at the last minute, you sometimes have to fill a speech slot at the last minute, and it really makes you stand on your toes and build that confidence in terms of getting out there and communicating to different people. Another good one to look at here, particularly, is the problem solving and critical thinking, because at every stage of being a club coach, you are working with the club very closely, but I guess the very initial stages and where you're developing your plan, you have to identify what needs to be worked on. But you can't fix everything, because every club has difficulties and challenges that it can improve upon. In terms of designing the goals that the club's going to work towards, they're going to be 2 or 3 things. And the problem solving and the critical analysis here is essential, because if you try to fix everything, it just won't work. And it's you as a club coach who can really add that value. Another interesting one to bring on is around the building your ability to persuade people, and also the conflict management. Now, ideally, the situation works out that you meet with your club in advance and you build a relationship with them, and then you're appointed and it all goes fine and serenely well. Life isn't always like that. I'm glad to say that I have a really good relationship with my club that I'm coaching, but they are very open and they wanted the help. Sometimes I imagine that is not exactly the case, and it comes to you as the coach to help manage that situation, to build bridges and to really avoid any conflict, but if conflicts do arise, that you work through managing that. And these are all types of skills that you will almost certainly be able to work on and develop as a club coach. If that's not enough of an incentive, if you're more of a points mean prizes kind of person, there's lots of recognition and award for getting this. You get, if you're watching on the live broadcast, you'll be able to see my club coaching badge here. There's one on the slides there for the recording. You also get a certificate. As and when you are successful in getting the club to achieve its goals, you get that recognition from Toastmasters directly. It also counts towards your leadership track. If you're looking to become a distinguished Toastmaster on either the old educational programme or moving forward to pathways, a club coach is one way of getting you there. And for me, it's a fantastic way of getting you there. It's part of your Advanced Leader Silver at the moment, and it's even more relied upon in the new Pathways programme. It's also possible to combine being a club coach with your high performance leadership project, which is obviously also part of going towards being a distinguished Toastmaster. For the HPL project, you are working with a team, you have different parties, you're working and bringing people together to achieve a common goal. It fits very much in line with being a club coach, and it is something that could be pinned together to achieve that goal for your own educational progress, as well as using the HPL project as a real tool to drive you through how you're going to achieve the goals for the club before you are able to hand over as club coach. Ultimately, the nice, warm, fuzzy feeling is going to come from the fact that you will be recognised as a person that gets things done, because it's not easy being a club coach, but it is rewarding. I'm not sure we've had any more questions come through yet. I don't know if Lucas or Florian, you have anything you'd like to add at that stage?
We're monitoring the questions. So far, we didn't get any questions from the audience. So I think this is a good moment to encourage the audience. Feel free to ask any questions that you might have to Kat. And Kat, I had one more personal. So if you look back now on the couple of months that you've spent as a club coach, is there like, you know, one thing that you remember, one moment that you realized, wow, this really makes sense. I'm glad I invested the time. Is there something like that?
Yeah, it would be when, I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute, not that specific example, but around that initial analysis that you do when you go and meet with the club. And I had a really good feeling, incredibly small number of people who are very active. It's not even the whole 6 members who are very active. But I could see that they were motivated, and I could see that they wanted to make a difference. But it was so overwhelming that we held hands and started it moving together. When that started to make a difference, when people started to see the posters, guests started to come along to the meetings. And what I was loving as well, particularly, is when the guests come to the meetings, they get a lot out of it. They see the value from a meeting. Even if there are still only 5 or 6 people in the meeting, people are going away and really seeing the value of coming along. I am excited about the prospect of when there are 18 people in the meeting and they're really, really seeing the value. But it was that ticking over point when it wasn't just the excitement of the committee, it was bringing people in and them sharing that excitement too. And being on a regular basis, I was able to enjoy that.
Thank you. So yeah, so I can imagine like it was maybe because it was you who enabled that the growth and the success, because these people, they had to put in the effort, but you were like a catalyst of their success.
Yeah, right? A catalyst and a sounding board, and just someone who can say, yes, you can do it. And I think that is a particular challenge with the corporate clubs that, certainly in my experience, they don't often get as well integrated with the broader Toastmasters community. This club is still, frankly, and certainly was in that stage. As soon as they get to a stage where they're eligible to compete, I'm going to be encouraging them to bring people along to the contest and get more involved. But often with the corporate clubs, they meet during work hours. A lot of the area, division, district events are obviously outside of working hours, and there is always a little bit of a conflict there, I sense. But I've been able to be a very active conduit between what's happening outside in the world and to encourage them And share that other people have problems too, because if you're in a silo and you just see that this is our issue or we don't know how to get out of this hole, we've got great ideas, but we just can't get going with it. Really just having the encouragement, putting the hand in the small of the back and pushing them forward to make that step. It's just really there. All credit goes to them. I have to say they have worked their socks off and it is really paying dividends.
Right, I can imagine that. We got the first couple of questions from the audience.
Okay.
The first one from Alexandra Manger, and the question is, can you tell us some of the measures you took to increase membership and to get the club going again? Was there something you measured?
This club.
Thanks, Alexandra, for the question.
Yeah, thank you. This club in particular, it's a corporate club, and it was really about changing the way that it was marketed. It's not supported by finances from HR or anything like that, as a matter of course. So I think sometimes corporate clubs get a lot of members because they're paid for. This is not in that situation, but it is within the corporate environment. And it was really just raising the awareness and making sure that when the information was shared, it was shared in lots of different ways. It was shared on the intranet to an internal networking organisation, simple as posters by the water coolers, that whole spectrum, and really bombarding the environment in which everyone's seeing things. And when you see it, and always being up to date, so always having the next meeting date on there, really simple things, but actually made a huge effective difference in a very short space of time.
Mm-hmm.
They also decided to reach out, and this was a very brave move in my view, and it has really worked, to engage with a branch of the organisation in the UK as well, and have meetings in both locations, which is an awful lot harder for the committee to be running, but actually has worked out fantastically.
Right. Okay, thank you. There's a couple of more. So what I suggest, I read now one more, and then you can move on to the next part, then we take the rest of the questions.
Oh,
is that okay? Yeah. The next one is from Julie from London. What was the most important for you when looking back to have achieved? And what was the most difficult?
Well, we're only partway there, so the journey is definitely not done yet. I don't believe that the club is at a sustainable level yet, which is why I think whilst Toastmasters says it's the +5 members, which when we achieved that, it was fantastic. And actually probably before we even did that, it was when they weren't suspended, because you have to have 8 members to maintain your existence as a club, otherwise we're suspended, and they pushed and pushed and pushed to get that, because someone was actually leaving as well, retiring. So they had to get 3 new members in a relatively short space of time. And the focus that they had to do that was a huge achievement. And, lots of congratulations at that interim stage. Then when we got the +5, and it's certainly going to keep coming through, they've had their first CC award registered. I can certainly see a CL coming through in the following months. They are pretty much, touch wood without doubt, going to get their DCP in this first year, which, given the number of members and also quite a young membership group, so in terms of people just managing to work through the programme in time to get the educational awards through, I'm delighted. Not counting the chickens until they're hatched, but that's been being on that trajectory has been a really exciting moment for the whole team. In terms of the biggest challenge, that probably coincides with just making sure they had enough members to not be suspended, because then if you're suspended, you cannot participate within the Distinguished Club programme, so they'd have to get unsuspended at the next renewals period, which would then really push back. And I think from their perspective, trying to get this minimum target done of the 5 DCP and the +5 members in that first 12 months, the momentum's important. And I think if they had been suspended, then you're looking into more than a year and a half into the future before you actually know that you're going to achieve your goals. So that was a big thing hanging over the club.
Right, thanks. And just comment to the previous, I think then what you mentioned, celebrating achievements both on member level and as well on the club level becomes really important in these cases, right?
Even more important than it is normally. I'm a big fan of celebrating new members joining the club, even if you're a club of 50 members. Yep. Make it noticed. People are coming in and the members are the lifeblood of Toastmasters. Sorry, the new members are the lifeblood of Toastmasters. So having them there when they are increasing the headcount by 15%, it's pretty. And all of those little things, just really celebrating when someone is brave enough, because this club also has a number of nervous speakers coming and joining, which I haven't noticed so much in the clubs that I've seen in the community, certainly the ones I've experienced, and really just even celebrating when someone can get up and say their name and why they're here, and being thrown into doing a tabletop pick. There's a really wonderful supportive environment within the club, and helping engender the success of whatever size they are is really important.
Right. Brilliant. All right, we got a couple of questions coming in. I see Florian is taking care of them in the background. Thanks a lot for that, Florian. Kat, for the moment, I suggest you continue with the rest of your content, and to the audience, write your questions down, and we'll take them in the next break.
Yeah, please do, because we're going to have plenty of time at the end, and do jump in if you think there's anything you want to cover in the meantime, please. So in terms of the third section, then, we're looking at hints and tips for rebuilding a club. And what I want to do is just break this down into 3 different sections, and it's looking at why the club is struggling, what the route to success is, and then how to work with the officers and the members of the club to achieve its goals. And the first one there, why is the club struggling? This is absolutely fundamental that you understand this from the outset. Understanding in your very initial review of the club what is causing it its issues. Almost all the time the club can be saved, but there'll be some times when it can't be saved because of circumstances completely beyond anyone's control. I think if you're about to take on a leadership position, it's important that you know exactly where you stand. And in my view, the best way to do this is go along to the club, to a normal regular meeting once or twice, get in touch with them, explain to them in advance why you're going along. Don't do it too stealth-like, and just have almost go and be a general evaluator at the meeting, get a sense as to what's going on. Also, do what you can to have a sit down with the president, perhaps some more of the club officers, just to get a sense as to what they think the current situation is and how they feel about it. And it's really important that you do work with the officers in this initial analysis, because it's about building that rapport from the outset. You need to make sure that they are on side with you if you are going to be appointed at a later date as a coach, because otherwise you're going to be having a conflict situation before you've even started the process. And the sort of things you can discuss with the officers at the outset is what the root cause of the issues is. I mean, sometimes it could be very obvious, but sometimes less so, and to really speak to them about it, get their view, and obviously bring along your own third-party view as well. Also important to discuss it with the area director and the division director too, if you're not so closely involved with them, to get their perspective. See if you can have a look at a copy of the area director visit report, the last one, maybe the one before as well, to get that view. And analysing what's changed, and then looking at what the current situation is in terms of the few members that you have left. Are they experienced? Are they inexperienced? Are they motivated to do something? Like in my situation, the remaining members love Toastmasters and are incredibly motivated to do what they can to keep the club going and then grow it. But seeing what situation you're going to be taking on. And also having a look at what support still remains. Going back to what I said earlier around the fact that there was a need for this club to exist in the first place. Is that need still there? Does it still have the support in a corporate environment, for example? Has it lost HR support, either in terms of financial support or being on some sort of learning and development list? And within the community, is there still a support in the community for it, where it originally came from? So it's first things first, just knowing exactly what you might be, frankly, letting yourself in for. Looking at the route to success. After you've done your initial analysis, you really need to dig in. And there is a great tool, which there's a link to there, in just a 2-page example that looks like this, which is the Club Coach Troubleshooting Guide. And it's a fantastic little sheet with a scale of various different features of the club that you can be analysing. And so, for example, members are willing to work together to solve the club's problems. Meetings are fun, and club programmes are varied and dynamic. Sounds a little bit familiar, a bit like the moments of truth analysis that you may do with your clubs. It's also fairly analogous to what you'll be seeing on the area director visit reports. And it's looking at all of those features that make a good club. Quality meetings, members are engaged, guests are welcomed. By going through all of those things, and say it's on a scale of things that are working well and things that are working less well, you can analyse really where the weaknesses lie. Again, this should be done in collusion with the club officers to make sure that they are engaged in the process, and also ask the members. You could even run a mini moments of truth at a meeting just to get that big open feedback. If your club is in a situation where it is a struggling club, there are 12 or fewer people to talk to, why not try and speak to all of them? Once you've gone through that that sort of in-depth analysis with the club officers and got really to grips with what the strengths and the weaknesses are of the club today, what you need to do is develop a plan and agree the goals. And again, you'll hear it again from me that this is doing it in conjunction with the club officers. This is the route to success. And the way I thought about it was breaking it down into different lengths of goals. So your short-term goal can be as simple as, have you got a full agenda for next week? And it might be that 3 people are doubling up on roles, but is your agenda full? When guests come along to the meeting, are they going to see a quality meeting take place? Mid-term goal is your 12 to 24 months of becoming distinguished, having the right number of members. And the long-term goal that any club should be working towards, and particularly a club in this situation, is being healthy and self-sustaining. With any type of goal-setting process, you do exactly the same here. These need to be smart, sensible goals, but also you need to iterate them as you're progressing. Things change, new information comes in, new situations happen. So make sure that you're working with the committee over time to develop these goals, particularly the shorter term ones. The mid-term goal is a pretty fixed Toastmasters defined goal, but seeing how it develops over time to achieve the ultimate goal of being a healthy and self-sustaining club.
Quick question to the long-term goal. Do you set yourself, or do you recommend setting a limit? Okay, let's give this club, for example, 1 year, and then we see. Because you do not want to spend 5 years of your life coaching a club that maybe never can get sustainable.
Well, the good news is that Toastmasters won't let you do that. You could be reappointed as a club coach, I suppose, but by having this maximum of 2 years to achieve it, I think that is Toastmasters saying, this is the period in which it should happen. Because, and actually I'll flip very quickly onto the next slide, because this is the most important thing, and it ties in with what's just about to answer to you, which is how you're working with the officers, the what to do with a struggling club. There are so many different ways in which a club can be struggling. There are too many to answer here and too specific. We can cover a couple of examples, particularly if people listening in have questions, but it's more about how you do it. And this is my biggest piece of advice to you. If you only take one thing away from this webinar, this is it. When you're coaching a club, don't just do it for them. And that is why we have such a defined period in which to coach the club, because it has to be self-sustaining. It has to be the members and the officers working together to help this club back on its feet. You're there to hold their hand along the way, but that is only for a short period of time. I guess when it gets to the end of that 2-year period, and Lucas or Florian, you may have seen examples of this, at that stage, if it's not working, it's probably likely that there is no longer an actual need for that club, or the remaining officers and members are not motivated to continue that club. If that is the case, then you can't just do it for them. And so I feel that there should be this defined period, which there is, and as with everything, at the end of that 2 years, if the club is almost achieving its goals, then perhaps it should be assigned another club coach or something. But again, it's case by case basis. But that's a long enough time, in my view, to get a club back on its feet. Is that the answer you were after?
Definitely. Thank you. Don't just do it for them. That's a great line.
Excellent. Good, good. So with that in mind, this is a phrase I've heard a few times within management consultancy, but if you think about your club officers within a club as the management team of the club, this line of make heroes out of management is at the basis of what you are doing as a club coach. It's so easy to helicopter in, fix things, be the hero, and then leave again. But if you're the one that was driving all of that change, that executed all of that change, that set the goals, that got people on board, that created the energy, and then leave because you're going back to your normal day-to-day Toastmasters business, then the management is not left empowered. So really think about it as making a hero out of the management team, out of the club officer committee, so as they can take this forward. And there are a few ways that I think we can really focus on doing that. We've covered a couple already about working as a team together, building rapport, not only at the start, but throughout the whole process. Remembering that we're all here to serve members in leadership roles in Toastmasters. It's a fundamental aspect of Toastmasters, and in this role, you're doing that no different to any other time and serving the members of that club. There's also looking at prioritising the key actions, and I'll just bring up this other thing here, which is looking at the core values of Toastmasters. And this really ties in with all of the core values of Toastmasters: integrity, respect, service, and excellence. And I'd just like to focus on, because we've touched on the first ones a little bit already, the last two things on there around prioritising key actions and instilling enthusiasm, loyalty, and a sense of responsibility for the club's future. So the last one there is really what I was saying. It's about leaving the club in good hands and coming in with new enthusiasm yourself as an outsider, not having been sat in a situation where the club has been in decline, possibly for some time, net decline of a couple of members each year that's now got it into this sticky situation. You can come in with that new joy, which is incredibly helpful to a new club, to a struggling club, sorry. Prioritising key actions, though, I think is where the value can really be added with a club coach, because when you're in the thick of a situation, it's sometimes difficult to see the wood for the trees. As a club coach, you come in, you do your troubleshooting analysis, you speak with the committee and the members, and sometimes there may be so many things to fix, it's very difficult to see what the priority is. Coming in as a club coach with an external pair of eyes, I think, is really where you can add the value, because you can actually say, yes, that needs fixing, yes, that needs fixing, but we can't do it all. These are the three things that I believe will make this club get back on the right track. Obviously, it's an opinion, you discuss it, you set the goals around it, but that, I think, is a really excellent way of adding the value, not just turning up at the meetings. It's really that what differentiates you as a club coach from being another member of the club.
Right. Kat, a couple of questions that are connected directly to this slide. The first one was sent by Paulina Karabach, and her question is, how did the officers team of the club you coached perceive your intervention into their club? If you know what's meant by this question, if they didn't feel like you were, interfering, if they didn't perceive it negatively. And I believe it's connected with building the rapport. I was curious if you could maybe give a specific example how you personally do that, how you avoid this perception.
Well, it is partly building rapport, and I think it's also really plays for the serving the members, and that includes the club officers. Building rapport, I went in from the outset wanting to be interested in them, and also this aside, in the run-up to the election for the area director role that I really wanted to be appointed for this year, I visited all of the clubs in the area. 2 of them are mine. I am a member of 2 of those clubs, so they did know me already. But the other ones, they didn't know me, and I went to meet with them. I wanted to understand how their clubs operated, and I wanted them to know me. So it is something that I like to do. I think it's important where you can to meet people face to face and to build that rapport from the outset. I went in being helpful. I went and was general evaluator, and I think maybe on my first meeting I ended up picking topics evaluator or something at the same time because they were short. So I was showing that I was willing to be helpful, willing to support them, willing to serve them as a club and as members.
Willing to do the work.
And yeah, just getting involved really, and being part of the team, even though, whilst I said at the top of the presentation that once you've become appointed club coach, you can be a member. I have chosen not to join as a member. I go and I support them at their meetings, but it's a corporate club. I cannot continue to be a member into perpetuity. So actually, I don't think me becoming a member would help them be self-sustaining in the future. So I haven't become a member, but I'm going and attending the meetings and helping support. I am looking forward to the day with great delight where they don't need me to take a role on the agenda. That will be accomplished. But it's been, it's the support and the serving, and for me that has worked. And I think that's why it's an important distinction between, it is possible, I believe, that yourself, Lucas, or Florian can simply appoint someone as a club coach. I think that is then putting it into slightly riskier territory, because then someone could be affronted. The committee could think, well, I know we're struggling, but we can do this on our own. It was completely the inverse. I met with them, I was elected as area director, then I proposed that I became the club coach.
Right, great, thanks for explaining. One more that's loosely connected to what you just spoke about, it's more connected to what you mentioned in one of the previous slides, it's related to the setting the club goals, short-term, mid-term, long-term. And it came from Kasia from Ascot Speakers. And the question is it worth to ask club officers to plan meetings 1 or 2 months in advance when the membership is so low?
I'm guessing that's the regular meeting content. Probably a bit more challenging. I know that in one of my clubs, we do plan them quite a long way in advance because the meetings get fairly well filled up. There's obviously always a gap or two for people to slot in, but certainly the speech slots get filled out for a few weeks in advance, and we meet weekly. The club I'm working with meets fortnightly, and they are really maybe always trying to get the next one in good shape, and then the next one after that. So at the meeting, they come at the end now with 2 sheets printed out, roles for the next meeting, roles 2 meetings time. What do you want to sign up for? And it's become a very engaged process in that way. It's very interactive, it's encouraging, it's a little bit of a, go on, you know you can do this, you're up for it now, you've been here long enough, you can do an evaluator, etc. I think going a long way into the future, if it's working a little bit, fine. For me, the risk would be you're just going to log onto the system and see a whole stretch of vacant agendas. And that's not motivating, and people don't want to come along to meetings that don't have people signed up.
I can understand that. I can understand that. And connected to what you just said is a question from Monika Szlachta from Pionier Rzeszów, Poland. And Monika would like to know whether it is good to join a struggling club. Like, how do you motivate, a guest to join a struggling club? Or how do you explain to the officers that for their guests, it's good to join their club?
One of the biggest selling points about joining a club without very many members is the number of speaking opportunities that are available to you. You could probably do a speech at every single meeting. If you have someone that's very motivated to get through their speeches, you may even be able to take 2 roles, so you could be ticking off a speech and a leadership role at each meeting. So it has that fantastic vacuum of stage time to be filled. I think, though, even with a small number of people, you can create a quality meeting, but it's about having the right people on the team. And one of the things I've been really working with my club about is making sure that their evaluations are effective, so people feel like they're getting value out of the meeting. Because when it's a smaller group, I was feeling there's a tendency to just be a little bit too nice. And actually, if people are there to learn, just giving them commendations isn't really going to make them want to come back again. So that was one thing that we've really focused on. But I think it is possible to have energy, to have fun topics, themes, to encourage people. And sometimes actually for potentially nervous speakers coming in, that smaller speaking environment is more comfortable. You know, speaking to a room of 8 to 10 people versus possibly 20 to 30 or even 40 people, it's a safer environment potentially for them to step up at the start.
Thank you.
That I think though as well, it just occurred to me linking it back to what I was saying about the momentum and it being important in my view that you do try and get the club to a sustainable level within the first 12 months, because you can only get that excitement going for so long. And once you've got to a certain level of a number of members, that's going to then be fine and it will self-perpetuate. But if imagine you're dragging one member every 2 months, crawling, getting slightly larger a little bit at a time, then that is going to be difficult to maintain that energy, to maintain that engagement between even the existing members, let alone potential members coming in as guests. So I think really focusing on trying to get the membership to grow quickly to a reasonable level, and then you will have that energy self-perpetuating.
Right, understand. Thank you. Thanks for explaining this.
No problem. Any other questions on that right now?
I saw a question from Tariq, and Tariq was asking, I believe you touched it a little bit on one of your previous slides, but the question was, how do you get the motivated committee together to share the workload? Because how I perceive it, I can imagine that there's a couple of members or a couple of people on the committee. How do you get them, share the workload so that there's not one person overwhelmed, for example?
That's a challenge, but I think that is a challenge at every single Toastmasters committee I've ever seen in operation. I don't know if you found the same, Lucas, but it is difficult because you are always going to get a couple of people that are much more motivated and even just have more time to get involved, more time to commit. I think for a short time, people can commit more. And that is certainly something we've had. We've had 2 of the committee members at this club who have been particularly active, the one that I'm working with. The importance is that they can see the benefits of the work they're putting in. It's really paying off now. And you can see that growth coming through. They've had new members joining, which has expanded their committee. They didn't have a full 7-strong committee, but they now have new people coming in that are, one, for example, is a rejoining Toastmaster. So they've joined the committee, which has helped bring knowledge and further support. And then they can really start building their own leadership style around how they can delegate to their team and work properly as a committee. But I believe that for a short period, people are willing, if they're motivated to make this club work, then they will be willing to put that effort in. But I do agree that over a longer period, again, like anything, it will wane, and the last thing you want to do is turn a motivated president, for example, into someone who leaves the club. That would be a disaster.
Right. I think that's the anti-job of a club coach, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's exactly that. And it's having that constant dialogue and maintaining that connection to see if there is something that feels like it's about to go wrong, and giving them space, giving them extra support, saying, that's a really good idea, but you actually don't need to do that right now. Perhaps leave that for 6 months' time when you've got someone you can rely on to help you with that, or there are just more members, or whatever it is, helping them identify, because I think that is the prioritization. I mean, it is on here. I think it's incredibly important, because really at the start of certainly where I started with working with this club, there was a lot to work on, but we really focused on the things that were going to make the biggest difference in the shortest space of time. And then we can think about the broader picture.
So basically you becoming a manager who also makes sure that the people from your team, they do not burn out, so that you focus their efforts, right? Because you know which areas it pays off and which areas they can leave for later.
And then that there will be things that people whoever within the club, not necessarily the people that you're dealing with on the committee, which is obviously a closer relationship, but they may say that we think this should be done like this. Everyone's going to have an opinion about it, because if people care, they're going to have an opinion and they're going to be passionate about it. And that's a good thing. And then it's just working with how that fits with the goals. And that's why it's important to agree what those goals are.
Right. Brilliant. We're coming close to the full hour. So maybe right now I would ask Florian. Florian, is there something that you would like to ask Kat, or that you would like Kat to highlight that hasn't been said yet?
Not really. I mean, it's been a really comprehensive webinar, Kat. Thank you very much. You may be asked to repeat it in a workshop at a TLI or at the club coach like boot camp that we're planning to organize early in the new year. So, but it was really useful. I quite like the emphasis on two things. Number one, that every club can be saved. I agree. Every club can be saved. There's always something good about club. But the other one is that sometimes it's time to move on, and the club coaching process cannot last forever. We've had a couple of clubs in our district this year that weren't doing so well, like Speak Out, Ken Speakers. They've got club coaches now and they're back on track, getting back there. But it is a process. And what I would say again is that it's a commitment. It's a commitment because it takes time to be a club coach. It takes time to really work with people. It takes time to listen, but it's a really great way to develop your skill. When I was area director almost 2 years ago now, one of the highlights for me as area director was when I had a meeting with the committee of a corporate club, and they said to me during the meeting, we think we're going to finish the club. I had a talk with the president afterwards. She almost cried in front of me, actually. I'm burnt out, something's got to give. Something was like, no, we're going to find some solution. And we did find some solution. The club is still running. The club got chartered the next year. They're still doing well at the moment, considering moving on to Easy Speak. So there is always hope. There are resources indeed that you can use. We are looking to develop even more resources in District 91 to just build upon these resources, but help is available, and just do it. Yeah. No club should be left behind, if possible.
That's exactly it. And I've just clicked onto a resources slide here, the troubleshooting guide that I mentioned before, and some more information around rebuilding clubs. It's partly about club coaching, but could be applied to any club that's starting to struggle at least. But actually, we've also got the biggest resource is the community around the club, and that is starting with the members, the officers. You as a club coach, you can have 2 club coaches appointed at once, so there could be 2 of you working alongside one another, and then area director, division director, and the district leadership team. They're all there to support both the club coach and obviously the club that is finding itself in a difficult position. And that is really what I would implore anyone out there to do if they're thinking about being a club coach or thinking about reaching out for a club coach. Bear this in mind, because these people are there to help you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing also to potentially relaunch a club as part of club coaching, we're exploring that with a few corporates in this round, is to organize an open meeting where you do like a new demonstration meeting where you get the people enthused again, you get some really good speakers, interactive table topics, interactive evaluation, and everyone in the room gets enthused. This is a tactic that we're planning to try with the State Street Club, and I've just learned today the Northern Trust Club is keen on the idea as well. It's a bit more of an investment from the district because these initiatives have got to be supported. We have guidelines in District 91 that Lucas can share around in 95 if there's request to, but that's the other way, because typically corporate clubs, you can start with 30, 40 members really easily if you have a cracking demo meeting. Well, why just don't do it again? You do another cracking demo meeting, you get your number back on track, and then you're off on a strong track.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, if I may,
Thanks.
Lucas, before I hand over to you, I'll leave with one very last thought, which is this. It's one of the biggest challenges you can take in your Toastmasters career. Are you up for it?
Wow. That's a great. Okay. So maybe Well, first of all, Kat, thanks a lot. Thanks a million for doing this webinar. This was a great help. I already received some feedback from people who are online that it was super helpful. And we'll get even more from these people. There were a couple of people who mentioned that would not be able to attend, but who will watch the recording. And yeah, Florian, thanks to you also for connecting us with and making this possible, this joint webinar, for putting us into contact, and for this great line: no club should be left behind. This is what I'll go to bed with tonight.
It sounds a bit political, but I think it's a great line, and I think it's a good, when you use the risk of a club being suspended, it's a good way to scare people in club officer training. I admit that I have used that when I run club officer training 2 years ago, and I don't want your club to fail. As I mentioned earlier, we've got another webinar upcoming in District 91 on Easy Speak, which is on Sunday evening at 9 o'clock Central European times. But this was a really good webinar, Kat. Thanks again, and thanks for all the great work that you're doing. We'll definitely be doing joint webinars a lot more often in January. We could explore coaching again. We're looking to kind of run maybe a club coaching boot camp in D91 to just really get everything structured. If people want to fly over to London, they're very welcome. They're very welcome too. But what I want to highlight is we have some really common challenges, Toastmaster, all over Europe. Let's work together. Let's solve these challenges together. Let's grow forward together, as I like to say it.
Let's grow all together. Excellent. Thanks a lot, everyone. I wish everyone a good night. If you motivated becoming a club coach, get in touch with myself or Mr. Florian Bay. It can depend on which district you're from. Kat, maybe last thing, your contact. If anybody has any follow-up questions, can we share some contact to the Facebook event so that people can reach out to you?
Absolutely. They can either get in touch with me on LinkedIn, it's Kat Kipling on LinkedIn, or if they drop either you or Florian an email, that can make its way through to me.
Super. Brilliant. And with that, I wish everyone a great night, and don't leave any club behind.
Yeah. Good night, everyone.
Good night.